Okay, the first announcement is I've got some good news and I've got some bad news. Do you want the bad news first? Ali Brooke is not coming. For those of you who don't know, Ali Brooke's stage name is Low Key. And sadly, it's unavoidable. It was very short notice. However, the good news is that in its place, we've been privileged to get an actress called Amy Blake, who does a one-woman play about a woman called Rachel Corrie that you may or may not have heard of. Rachel Corrie was an American activist and diarist, and she was also a member of a pro-Palestinian group called the International Solidarity Movement. She was killed by the Israeli Defense Forces. She got run over by a bulldozer at 23 years of age in a combat zone in Rafah, in the southern part of the Gaza Strip. And this was during the height of the Second Palestinian Intifada. Now, I've not seen this. I'm really excited about it and looking forward to doing it. So we don't get low-key. We get something, in my view, much more important. So that's going to take place in the Marquee. If you don't know where the Marquee is, you'll find it. Just keep walking around the hotel till you see a big tent. Actually, you will find it. If you're in the bar and there's that big lawn outside the bar, if you look to your left, that's where the Marquee is. And Amy is on a very tight schedule. She has to leave straight after the performance. So if we can assemble in the Marquee at 7:20 for the commencement of the performance at 7:30, it'll take an hour. And you can, if you wish, bring a drink in with you, a glass of wine or beer or whatever it is. But it's an hour, so please take enough to last you an hour. It's not polite to be going in and out buying drinks while somebody's doing their work. So 7:20 in the Marquee, that's the date. Second announcement is, you may have them in front of you, Mick McGrath is doing a survey amongst all of you, and he's going to tell you what it all means and what you need to do.
Most of you will have the survey in front of you. If you don't have a copy of the survey, then we'll get more made and I'll put them here on the table. So if you've got it in front of you, you will notice that questions 1 to 3 are your view on our political strategy, and it's about extending that view from the work that you've already done in this incredibly important document. And it relates to a survey that we did 2 years ago in 2017. So we're going to do a correlation about political awareness and political understanding as far as we can do. So 4 and 5 relate to your political development. And I think it was London and South Eastern that mentioned the importance of that, because the fact is that for many of you here, you are going to be the leadership for the next 30, 40, even 50 years. Long since we'll have departed the stage. Now, there was a comment made earlier on about the role of academics and intellectuals and I don't know what else, activists and stuff like that. What we called in the Communist Party in years gone by was what your role is, you're the cadre. What Gramsci called your organic intellectuals. So the unity of theory and practice has a word on the left, and that word is praxis. That we unify our intellectual understanding with our activism. Because the reality is that if we want a socialism for the 21st century, we need to understand the dynamics of capitalism. Because that is what Marx, Engels, and a whole lot of others actually did, was understand the dynamics of capitalism and let socialism, in a sense, take care of itself. Finally, the socialism taking care of itself. Now, I know Joyce mentioned about vision and values. I don't want vision and values in this. I want you to try to think about what are the key characteristics of socialism. If you need to write on the back of the paper, then do that. And if you could have it back to us by Friday at lunchtime on the table there, we'd be much obliged. Thank you very much.
Okay, and now back to the programme. To my left is Lian Groves and Fatima Mahmood, who are going to lead a session around a short film called Unity Over Division, and it's an overview of campaigning against the far right. Before Lian and Fatima begin, however, Barry's found, as Barry always can, a 3-minute video about stuff that he wants to show you.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. Well, it's actually part of the Unity Over Division project that we're involved in, the campaign we're involved in. So I'm just going to show this film. There's a couple of other wee films we're going to show during the session at different points in time. But I think this kind of sets the scene. It's quite emotive, so I'll just pre-warn you that. Quite an emotive film. And it was created by members of our BAM National Committee. So I think you'll find this very powerful.
One of my first experiences of racism was that you're not like the others, you're one of us.
This lady runs along and jumps on the bus. She says, no, but I'm aware of those foreigners, they're jumping the queue. I said, what foreigners? And I'm looking at her and she's looking at me. I'm not talking about you.
When my friends say it, it really hurts you, it really hurts. And then they turn to you and they realise and say, well, I don't mean you, you're okay.
It was in my teens when I played for football for a local black nation at the Minority Football Club, and we had a local game and it was against the opponent were all white. Apologies, this is the first time I'm going back to that. To be abused just because of my colour was something I never imagined people hated something for. We were spat at. We were vividly called, we were called gollywogs. Our Afro-Caribbeans were monkey chanted. They referred to our mothers as whores, and these were parents. I've never spoken about this to anybody, and I was 17 at the time, playing for under 17s league, and I never wished that on anybody, but that was one of my first experience of what true hatred is based on colour.
I felt unsafe going out to different areas, and should I ever feel like that? No. Sometimes there's good days and sometimes there's bad days, but in the past we've had what we would call office banter.
Bricklayers on the gantry shouted, we'll have the nigger, we don't want that one, because he looks like he can carry a few bricks. And as to which he said, look, just take the notice, it's just banter.
A gollywog, which is still offensive, but they had felt like it was no longer offensive.
I thought all that had gone. Very worrying for my family. I don't want them experiencing the things that I experienced.
I think racism has got worse. Colleagues or meetings I've gone to when Brexit first came out, a lot of it was based on colleagues saying, I want Britain to be British again. I didn't quite understand that term and what it actually meant, because did it mean you didn't want anybody that was part of immigration coming in? Because potentially that's me. My parents are from the Caribbean background. I'm born here, but then did you mean me as not being accepted also? And that was unfortunately union counterparts.
With my daughter, she applied for a job and a friend used her CV as a template and she got the job and my daughter didn't. And my daughter couldn't understand that. She said because they looked at my name.
I would always tell the person first of all that they were offending me, And secondly, that if they repeated the offence, I would be going to a manager and reporting them, be myself, not to get angry, not to shout back at them over offensive things, because at the end of the day, we're all human beings.
In more unionised workplaces, we do challenge it. I challenge it. It's about educating the person across the table what the rights and wrongs are. You know, what they're actually saying isn't actually how it should be. The workplaces where the union is better organised is challenged in there, but where there isn't, I think it's going to go under the radar.
We challenged it, but not in a negative, more in an educational, so that they were aware that just don't use that word. And I would also state that black people prefer to be called black people.
It's okay to talk about racism. Talk about it. You know, one should not hide.
Right. I hope you enjoyed that film, and I hope you learned something from that film. I think, can I just tell you the background to making that film? When we started the Unity Over Division campaign within the union, we started to talk to some of our shop stewards about why we were doing it. We went and spoke to a group of workers in a bus garage, and there were 10 white shop stewards there and 4 black. And some of the white shop stewards said to us, I don't know why the union is doing this anti-far right work, it's not a problem. And actually our black shop steward said, well, hang on a sec, it is a problem. And that was their lived experience, that there is a problem out there. So to go back a year ago, and it seems like a lot longer than that, 15,000 far-right people went on a demonstration in central London, and it was a massive wake-up call. My name's Lian and I work in the head office of Unite. I'm head of Unite Community. And we were getting calls saying Unite has got to do something. The growth of the far right in the UK is becoming a massive issue. Post-Brexit, the country has become completely divided, and the trade union needs to up its game, quite frankly. So there was a motion at policy conference last year saying just that the unions need to start leading a campaign against the growth of the far right and challenging the far right. And that's exactly what has happened. So my job in all of this is to coordinate it. And I've been working really closely with Barry in the education department, because the whole emphasis of what Unite is going to do to challenge the far right is about education, and it's about providing our members with the tools to fight against the far right. When we started going out and talking to national committees, regional committees, risk, etc., the common thing that was coming back from our members was that they didn't feel that they had the confidence to come up with the arguments against the far right. So we know what those arguments that the far right use. They rely on fear, they rely on hate, and they blame everything on other people. So, you know, we've got a housing crisis in this country. The far right blame immigrants. We've got insecure, low-paid jobs in this country. The far right blame immigrants. You can't get a hospital appointment. The far right blame immigrants. And our members were telling us, well, you know, what are the arguments against that? We need to know. We need training. We need education. And that's what Unite's response over the last year has been. I mean, we still go out and we mobilise on streets when the far rights come to our towns. We organise mobilisations. But our main core of the work that Unite is doing is through education and training. And so Barry and I and some others within our team have spent a year trying to build up some education modules. So, for example, Unite trains 10,000 shop stewards a year. And within every single one of those training courses, there will be a module on the dangers of the far right and how we challenge that narrative. I mean, they say, like, within the population, there is 5% of the population are fascists, and they're quite hardcore fascists, and they always will be. And then on the other side, you've got 20% that are everyone in this room, progressives, left-wing, liberal, not racist. And then you've got 15% that are being pulled towards the arguments of the far right. And then you've got about 60% of people that are kind of in the middle. And our job is not to talk to the converted. Our job is to pull those 15% back from being attracted to the arguments of the far right. And I'm sure that most of you within your workplaces will have heard comments from people that you're not comfortable with. Comments on the bus, comments in your home. Just to talk a bit about the far right, probably haven't got long, is they're very well funded now. There's a lot of money that is pouring in from the American alt-right movement that are basically, they're white supremacists. They believe that the white race is under attack. And they're saying, they talk about the Muslim invasion and that we're going to be subject to Sharia law. I mean, all this nonsense. But what the far right are doing quite effectively is these arguments are finding their way into mainstream politics. And when you've got the likes of Boris Johnson, who stands up wanting to win votes like Donald Trump, and start talking about, Muslim women looking like criminals in, letterboxes, then you know that things have gone too far. So it's our job to challenge that narrative, and we're going to do that through education and through mobilizing on the streets. And we're also, we have got a campaign, and Fatima's going to talk about how Tommy Robinson was stopped from becoming elected. The man that's gone into prison. But I just want to say as well that this campaign's been going for many years. I mean, Hope Not Hate have been trying to close down Tommy Robinson for years and years. And now Tommy Robinson is no longer allowed on Facebook. His Twitter account has been cancelled. And also his PayPal account. And that means we've managed to take away his money. And he's whining like a pig now. I mean, if any of you saw his plea to get into America yesterday was absolutely hysterical. But I think it just goes to show that when we organize, we can win. Another example of a small win, there's an organization called Generation Identity. And they're an offshoot of the American alt-right, and it's all about white supremacy and how white people's culture is under threat. And they had a video, a really high-end video, and within it they had footage of the Chelsea pensioners. And one of my colleagues who's ex-forces said there's no way they can use that image. So Unite, we got in contact with the press office of the Chelsea pensioners, and now they've removed that video. So again, we just chip away, and we campaign and we win. But you're going to be doing some of the activities that we've been working on after this, and I'm going to pass on to Fatima to talk about how they defeated Tommy in the Northwest.
Yeah, thanks, Lian. Thanks to Unite for inviting me. I'm absolutely stunned that I'm here talking about this. Before I watched the video, I had no idea that I'd be saying this right now. I normally talk about the sort of prejudices that I, as a Muslim woman who wears a headscarf, a visibly Muslim woman, faces only with friends and in personal circles. I've never really talked about it publicly because I've never felt comfortable talking about it publicly. But I think it's about time that people hear the truth of what actually goes on. First and foremost, being a Muslim woman who wears a headscarf, a woman of colour who wears a headscarf, is a very, very difficult ordeal. And the reasons are many. Essentially, you are facing 3 layers of prejudice. Being a woman of colour, and being a woman who's of a religious conviction. And all 3 have face their own forms of prejudice. But when you're in this package, you face all 3 in one go, and that's a very, very difficult thing to put up with. And the truth is, we can talk about the far right, and I will be talking about the far right, but we need to look at our own organisations first. Because the truth is, those far-right convictions have subtly seeped into our own organisations. I work for the Labour Party, and I can tell you, I have never felt this marginalised because of my faith and my colour, and it's something that I've raised again and again and again. But to raise the issue of race, to raise the issue of Islamophobia, and in my understanding, hijabophobia, has been extremely, extremely difficult. To win a listening ear has been like banging your head against a brick wall every day. We are now beginning to listen. We are now, and that's because we have the likes of Jeremy Corbyn, and that's because we have the likes of Jenny Formby in positions where we now feel safe enough to talk about these issues. But believe you me, it was not always the case. So really, in order to tackle the far right first, we need to start raising these issues within our own organisations and understanding them, understanding what racism really, really is. And in my personal experience, before I go into talking about what we did in the Northwest, it's not that you're an oppressed Muslim woman. It's not that you're a raging fanatic terrorist. It's not that you're anti-Western or anti-feminist or anti-gay. It's none of those things. It's because you're not those things. It's precisely because you are an educated woman. It's precisely because you are confident in your identity. It's precisely because you can achieve and you're not oppressed. And that's a threat to culture. And that's a threat, as Lian said, it's a white supremacist mentality. And if you hold that mentality, someone who comes along and represents very slightly alternative values, which we do, as someone from a Muslim background, yes, we do. But if you believe in equality, you'll listen to those arguments. But if you don't, and if you believe in racial superiority, you'll be threatened by those arguments. So in the Northwest, well, let's put it this way, we're no stranger to far-right movements, we're no stranger to far-right political candidates. In 2009, we had Nick Griffin, and sadly he won. He became an MEP. That really, really shook us. And in 2014, we knew we had to do something, and we had our first BAME European parliamentary candidate, which was Afzal Khan. Labour won for the Northwest in 2014. We kicked Nick Griffin out, but instead we saw the rise of UKIP, including the vile UKIP leader Paul Nuttall. And now in 2017, we again have been faced with not just a far-right candidate, but a particularly aggressive, vitriolic far-right candidate, namely Tommy Robinson. And his politics have to date been by far the most divisive and the most racism of them all. His politics was almost singularly focused on anti-Muslim hatred. It appealed to a variety of stereotypical tropes, as Lian mentioned, including the idea that gang rape is inherent in Muslim communities, that the UK will soon be governed by Sharia law, that Muslims are disloyal to the UK and Britain, a fifth column, so to speak. I mean, whatever his reasons and motives, he's clearly one seriously disturbed individual. And I'd like to say that perhaps a few milkshakes might calm him down, but that's a debate for another time. But here, we successfully got rid of him from the Northwest. And in order to fight the far right, I would say that we need a two-pronged approach. The first is long-term, and the second is short-term. The far right capitalizes on ignorance. It encourages warped ideas or perceptions of otherness. And in this case, in respect to racial, ethnic, and religious minorities. It fans the flames of racism by stoking fears of takeover, loss of control, foreign invasion, and being left behind. So whether it's left behind on the housing ladder, on NHS waiting lists, at work, school places, it's the whole idea that we're being left behind whilst minorities race ahead. And its particular form of its particular prejudice when it comes to Islamophobia is essentially a replay of the Crusader narrative that has existed for centuries but hasn't up to this day been addressed. To put a break on these narratives is a long-term, it's not going to happen overnight. It's not a quick fix. It requires a steady stream of education, which I believe Lian and Unite are working on with the Unity Over Division programme. A stream of education to break down misconceptions and in the case of Islamophobia, to break down fears of Muslims. It's about bringing communities together so that we mix better, so that we break down those barriers. We see each other as human beings, not as material, physical beings, not as a set of ideas or an ideologue, but human beings. And also, it's about these minority groups getting engaged in the mainstream and contributing positively to society, encouraging minority groups to go out there, become part of society, engage, and essentially, it's a sad thing to say, but have to prove the whole argument wrong. So that's our long-term solution. But for a more immediate effect, and this is what we did here in the Northwest, it's about campaigning in the most effective way. Both in 2014 and in 2019, we've consistently run a slick, effective, and winning campaign to kick out the far right. In both campaigns, BAME communities were absolutely key, if not central. Because there's a recognition that it's BAME communities that have the most to lose or have the most to fear should a far right candidate get into power. So the task was to make them aware of this, and then they should essentially vote against the far right and for the Labour Party. So the first priority was messaging, a simple, robust, resonant message that enough repetition would seep in through these communities. And this was our headline: Vote Labour on the 23rd of May to stand up to racism and Islamophobia in Europe. Simple, but it worked. We identified parts of the Northwest which had large BAME populations, places like Manchester, Blackburn, Oldham, Rochdale. And in each one of these areas, we appointed a BAME European campaign rep, someone we knew had contacts and connections to the BAME community, and someone we knew would be dynamic in driving this campaign forward. We devised a clear campaign strategy. First, to flyer outside the mosques every Friday. You cannot beat this. It's one of the most important campaign strategies when reaching out. In the Northwest, the Muslim community is the largest BAME population. It absolutely cannot be missed, because on a Friday, 1 hour, you will get the whole Muslim community, thousands and thousands of people in one place. So we didn't just target one mosque on the Friday, we targeted practically all the biggest mosques across the region on the Friday, when you're talking about tens of thousands of people in 1 hour. Something that door knocking and canvassing, what's important, can't really achieve. We got the mosques to do announcements for us. We got our candidates to speak to them. We ran BAME action days, whether it's at the local markets, whether it's on local, BAME populated streets where you get the sort of like the Curry Mile and lots of BAME shops and restaurants. Anywhere that there would be a large BAME, busy BAME population. Events, we did a whole series of events, big events, small events. We got the BAME press to come along, bang it out to the community. We did lots of social media, activists posting and sharing wildly. The word got out real fast. Crucially, we linked up with the main Labour Party structures. We didn't keep this campaign separate, and we didn't want to do that. We want it to be an integrated effort. We want the main structure of the Labour Party to recognise BAME campaigning as inherent to our outreach efforts. Until we got the CLP secretaries involved, we made sure that the BAME reps worked with their CLPs. And because of that, though even those areas which we didn't target got involved because the CLP secretaries decided to run their own campaign. And crucially, all the candidates got involved. You don't need to have BAME candidates to run a BAME campaign. All you need to do is have a BAME strategy. And the result, a massive BAME turnout on the day. We had a WhatsApp group on the day with all our activists communicating back to us and reporting back to us, and every single one of them said that the BAME, and this was even in areas which we hadn't targeted, that the BAME communities come out in droves. And this is a point to remember. Because BAME communities are so well connected, if you target one area, it spills over into the other area. So it's quite fluid. The boundaries don't work the same way as we're usually used to them. Unfortunately, we lost our third seat, which was Wajid, who was our only BAME candidate. But if we hadn't done this BAME campaign and if we hadn't got the BAME vote out, we would have lost our second seat. We had 3 seats. If we hadn't done that, we would have only had 1 MEP. But crucially, for this talk, Tommy Robinson's performance depended on a low turnout. The turnout in the BAME community massively prevented this from happening. He only received 2.24% of the vote, which consequently lost his deposit. Woo. UKIP were also wiped off the map, but there's much to be thought about and much to be questioned. I mean, the BAME campaign was a real success, and BAME communities came out in droves. And that's important when we want to get Jeremy into number 10 come a general election. But BAME campaigning in itself is not important. Labour lost its lead in the Northwest, and instead the Brexit Party and the Lib Dem took the lead. We need to question why we are no longer connecting with our white working classes. What has driven our white working classes, our natural Labour votership, to throw their electoral weight behind racist far-right parties? What has happened? And I don't believe it's because they truly believe this politics of hate and division. They may be jumping on the bandwagon, but deep down inside, I don't think so. It's more because this is the only way they now feel heard, a voice. They feel left behind. They feel abandoned. Labour needs to start reconnecting, whatever way that is. It needs to start reconnecting. And it's when we start doing that that we will be able to get Jeremy Corbyn into number 10 and we can govern the country for the many and not the few. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. You've now got to think about this in a group exercise, and I'll refer you again, please, to your booklets. This is a bit different from the other ones we've done. Last time you all considered the same question. This exercise involves a different challenge for each region. So just make sure that you're on the right page when you look at the questions that you need to answer. Also, as always, time is tight, and we did learn some lessons from the feedback from this morning's exercise. So just be clear about the rules. You will be allowed, it will still be done on PowerPoint, not Word, PowerPoint. And you will be allowed 2 slides only. If you have 3 slides, then I'm afraid we'll have to delete the 3rd, 4th, 5th or 6th. So you'll get 2 slides. Also, that means that you don't have to pack everything like War and Peace on 2 slides either. You need to actually make them visible from the back of the room. So the big challenge is to have the ability to make sure that you can encapsulate some key points in 2 slides and feed that back, each team, in less than 3 minutes. So that's the challenge you're going to have. So I'm not going to delay you any further, but I do think it is important that we do recognise the brilliant presentations from Lian and Fatima once again. Thank you. Right, off to your groups. We will begin the feedback at 3:15. Please, can we have the memory sticks back from the groups at 3:05 with the slides on? You can carry on talking till 3:15, but we need the memory sticks at 3:05, please.